Hey guys, Tightrope here, looking to ease the transition from Company of Heroes 2 to Company of Heroes 3 by covering a bunch of micro tips that have changed or don't work anymore. In COH2, if you put a heavy machine gun inside a building, to change the direction it was facing, you would use a hotkey, in this case S. And then you could cancel that order, so if an enemy approached you from a different direction, the heavy machine gun would automatically rotate that way to face it. This system has changed in COH3. Now with the building selected, you drag right-click in the direction you want the heavy machine gun to face. This is a fine enough idea, but at the moment I do have a few issues with how it works. Because there is no cancel facing command available, if an enemy approaches you from a different angle, your machine gun will not automatically rotate to face the enemy. And even if you right-click the enemy with the building selected, your machine gun will still not rotate to face the enemy. And if you switch your selection to the machine gun by using the tab key or clicking on it down here, if you give it a stop command, it will also not rotate to face the enemy. But if you right-click the enemy now with the machine gun inside the building specifically selected, it will rotate to face the enemy. And once the enemy is dead, it will rotate back to the facing you originally set it at. So I do feel there is some work to go here to make the system more intuitive in Company of Heroes 3. In COH2, when you wanted to retreat a squad that was inside a building, first you had to unload them from the building, then you had to wait until every single man had exited the building, and then you could hit the retreat button. In Company of Heroes 3, you can simply select the building and then hit the retreat button, and all the units that are inside will jump out the door closest to your base and start their retreat. Now this does make it easy for your enemy to predict your retreat and punish it, for instance by throwing a grenade at the door. So there are still applications for manually getting out a different door using tab and then right click, and perhaps even running a short distance to alter your retreat path to make it safer for your squad on retreat. Now the keen-eyed among you would have noticed that grenade onto the door didn't drop a single model from my squad that was retreating. Whereas in COH2, a grenade on the door like that would have been close to a wipe. And if I clump a squad next to that door and have a grenade thrown at them, now they do drop a significant number of models. This is because the defensive bonuses applied to your units when they are retreating has changed in Company of Heroes 3. In COH2, you would multiply the unit's target size by 0.4, also known as a 60% received accuracy bonus. This offered a lot of protection from small arms fire, but no protection from explosives. Whereas in Company of Heroes 3, the received accuracy bonus has been reduced to only 50%, but now you have a 25% received damage bonus, offering protection from both explosives and small arms fire. Combined with the fact that a lot of squads have more than 80 health now, going all the way up to 115, you're going to have to recalibrate when you throw grenades at retreating units. Though quite a few grenades do more than 80 damage, the Wehrmacht Panzergrenadiers grenade is able to knock out a full health, 110 HP Foot Guards section for British forces, and the Foot Guards grenade does enough damage to knock out a full health Pioneer model on retreat, even with the reduced damage bonus from retreating. So there's going to be a lot more learning about how much damage each grenade does and tailoring that to match the health of the enemy. And often in COH2, if you saw the grenade coming too late to retreat, you would stay in heavy cover to reduce the damage and then retreat afterwards. But now with the received damage bonus added to retreat in COH3, even though it doesn't reduce the damage as much as heavy cover, retreating instead of trying to soak the grenade in cover is probably going to be the right choice more often than not. In COH2, it didn't matter how damaged a building got. If it was still standing, all of its doors would be functional. Whereas in Company of Heroes 3, it appears you can now destroy doors. This grenade stopped the western and southern doors from functioning. Notice how this section of the door now seems to be destroyed. So keep a sharp eye on exactly where the building is damaged, because this does alter where your units can enter and exit from.
Everyone assemble outside. Don't forget your boots.
For example, I believe the eastern door on this building has been destroyed and my squad ended up teleporting out of the side of it for their retreat. So there may be some bugs here that need to be addressed. And when I destroyed all 3 doors on this building, the structure itself still had quite a lot of health left, and the unit no longer clumped near the door during entry and exit. In Company of Heroes 2, you could do a fast dismount from a troop transport while it was still moving by using Tab to select the first unit inside the transport, and then right-clicking to where that unit should start moving to. And then once the entire unit had exited the transport, in this case for the 4-man squad it took less than half a second, you would be able to give them commands such as throw a grenade. Whereas in Company of Heroes 3, if you try to do this type of fast drop-off, upon exiting the half-track, the squad is completely unresponsive to commands as they run around to form some kind of predetermined formation. And in this case it took over 7 seconds to complete before they were able to respond to commands again. So the fast drop-off with Tab is not a good idea, though I could imagine this getting patched in the future. Instead, in Company of Heroes 3, use the Unload Selected Troops button and then quickly give a command to the troop transport to keep driving. In this case, the squad was able to respond to commands after about 4 seconds, but here is another example where it took only around 2.5 seconds. Still much less responsive than the half a second it was in Company of Heroes 2, but still a big improvement from 7 seconds with the old method. This mainly seems to be impacting high model count squads. Doing a drop-off with a 3-man Pioneer experiences almost no delay. And this can cause issues when it comes to clown car type setups, where in Company of Heroes 2 it was very quick to jump out, give a repair command, and then queue up a command to jump back in once repairs had completed. Whereas in Company of Heroes 3, you cannot give an order to the engineers to get back into the troop transport while it is still damaged. Right-click only gives them the option of repair. Now this is very foolish because you can give a manual repair command with Z, so right-click should always be Enter Transport. So I imagine this will get patched at some stage. When you queued up a bunch of movement commands to a squad of infantry in Company of Heroes 2, the end result was less than desirable. The squad would start running to the next point when they were still around 10 range away from where you ordered them to go, making it worthless for precision movements. And it was even worse for vehicles, meaning I almost never used queued up movement commands in Company of Heroes 2. Whereas in COH3, the squad actually runs to each of the points that you tell them to. And though this does add a slight delay as the squad reaches each point, I much prefer this to the imprecise movement of COH2, because 10 range either way can make such a big difference when moving through congested areas or with retreat pathing. And vehicles in COH3 are the same, moving exactly to the ordered point.
Heading to your coordinates.
This should make the biggest difference when moving around camouflaged units. In COH2, since you couldn't rely on the unit running to the exact point you ordered them to with queued up commands, moving a unit in stealth required a lot of direct control. Whereas in COH3, now you can queue up a bunch of movement commands along cover and expect your unit to remain in stealth. In COH2, the sniper would have ended up crossing this gap instead of following the fence, which would have led to it being revealed. In Company of Heroes 2, it was quite common to capture points in this fashion, where you would right-click at the far edge of the capture circle, then queue up the capture command on that point, and then do that at the next point, with the aim of having your squad standing on the far side of the capture flag instead of the near, saving you a second or so of infantry running time while capturing territory. However, if you try this move in Company of Heroes 3, it ends up backfiring on you. Because as the squad runs back from the edge of the capture circle towards the capture flag, they end up running a few steps past the capture flag, so it's going to cost you a second or two instead of gain you a second or two. In COH2, if you had one man out of cover and you got fired at by a machine gun, most of the time your squad would end up getting suppressed by it. But now in COH3, suppression is handled at the squad level rather than the entity level. What this means is that if the majority of your squad is behind cover but you have 1 or 2 models standing out and you get fired at by a machine gun, your squad will no longer get suppressed, or at least it will take far longer, and this makes positioning your units in cover quite a bit more forgiving. Note that this only applies to suppression, not the other defensive bonuses provided by cover, so the models standing out of cover do end up dying first in this demonstration. In Company of Heroes 2, setting the direction that certain airstrikes came in from could make a huge difference in how long they took to arrive, depending on how far the plane had to travel from the edge of the map to get to that point. Whereas in Company of Heroes 3, if I do this strafe coming from the long side of the map, you can actually see the plane spawn on the map instead of coming off the side, and it takes around 8 seconds to deliver its payload. And coming from the short side of the map, the strafe also takes about 8 seconds to deliver its payload. Now I haven't tested every single one of these strafes yet, but it appears their directional element has been simplified. In Company of Heroes 2, moving vehicles, both friendly and enemy, could often phase through each other under certain conditions, and you would need to hit stop on your vehicle to prevent this from happening. Also, you could use attack ground on your vehicles to allow your other vehicles to easily phase through them. Whereas in Company of Heroes 3, phasing through vehicles, both enemy and friendly, does not seem to be possible. And it's the same story with attack ground in COH3, it does not allow your own vehicles to phase through either. In Company of Heroes 2, with certain indirect fire pieces, you could use attack ground or auto fire, and then as soon as the shell had launched, start a barrage, and this allowed you to fire off 2 shells back to back very rapidly. Whereas in Company of Heroes 3, this doesn't work at all, and you're better off going straight into the barrage. The COH3 Mortar takes around 5.5 seconds longer than the COH2 one did, so goodbye double taps. In certain scenarios in COH2, you could hear your enemy repairing their vehicle in the fog of war, which was not ideal. Whereas in COH3, as far as I can tell, you can no longer hear your enemy repairing their vehicle in the fog. And when an enemy entered a garrison for the first time in the fog of war, you could clearly hear the windows smash and also visibly see the windows had been broken. In COH3, if the building is on your screen, you can still hear the windows smash, but you cannot see that they have been destroyed. In this example, an enemy squad gets into the church just off screen to the left, and we cannot hear the windows smash at all. But you can see the window smash render in the instant the building comes into vision, even though the windows are on the far side that hasn't been seen yet. In COH2, it was common to ram your light vehicle into cover that it couldn't crush to try and force the enemy's unit out of position. In COH3, the enemy squad does still get pushed around a bit, but it isn't as good as it was in Company of Heroes 2. However, because of the auto-vault mechanism in COH3, if you drive your light vehicle on the other side of the cover, you can actually force the enemy squad to vault over to the wrong side, and this can be very powerful for combined infantry and light vehicle attacks into a defended area. And it is easier to execute this maneuver with reverse, since with right-click move, you can accidentally end up targeting the enemy squad instead for an attack, instead of moving to that point. In COH2, if the enemy threw an anti-vehicle satchel charge at you, you could ram them with your vehicle and catch them with the resulting explosion. Whereas in COH3, in spite of still having quite a large explosion, the anti-vehicle satchel doesn't do any friendly fire damage whatsoever. In COH2, it was common to push around squads that had anti-tank weapons, such as Airstrikes, with your vehicle, which denied them the opportunity to set up and fire. This doesn't work as well in Company of Heroes 3. Not only can tanks no longer crush infantry at the moment, but when you drive your tank into the squad of infantry, they don't get pushed as far away, and they tend to end up directly on the side of the tank, which makes it very difficult to continue pushing them without some very slow turning movements from the tank. And if you look closely, you can actually see this bazooka model start to line up their shot, then they phase inside of the tank while they're firing it, and then once the shot has fired, they pop out again. so while it can still kind of work, you may need to get the squad clumped up so they take a big hit from the tank's main gun. It is far worse than it was in Company of Heroes 2. If you use the attack ground command in COH2 on an anti-tank gun, it remains valid a little bit beyond the max range indicated by the circular dots, but stops being valid a little bit short of the far arrow running down the center. And if you give an attack ground command in this extended range band, the anti-tank gun will fire without having to reposition first. If you position a vehicle outside of the dotted indicated range, but inside of the arrow, your anti-tank gun does not fire at it. And if you give it an attack command, the anti-tank gun will reposition forwards so that the vehicle is on the dotted line before attacking. Whereas in COH3 you can see the edge of the attack ground range indicated by the white dotted line, but the yellow triangle goes quite a bit beyond this. And if we position an enemy unit at the yellow triangle, your anti-tank gun will attack it. But if you try to attack ground at the edge of the yellow triangle, your anti-tank gun will reposition, kind of spin around weirdly, and then attack. So overall it seems like this is a bit of a nerf to attack ground in COH3. I plan to do a standalone video about the changes to control groups at some stage. And if there are any COH2 to COH3 changes that I missed in this video, let me know in the comments below and I'll do a part 2. And if you enjoyed this video, I hope you consider coming on board as a Patreon backer.